Folks, we've been on quite the string of controversial films recently, haven't we? We had Don't Worry, Darling, then we had Blonde, then we had The Greatest Beer Run Ever, and now we have Amsterdam. Let's talk about it. Well, folks, Amsterdam, a lot of people, all they know about this film is, of course, the very impressive cast list, which is extensive, and it looks like they just picked from the list of, some of the greatest actors working today and just threw them in the film. And I will get into the cast, of course, but they are phenomenal. The controversy in this film lies in its director, David O. Russell, who has been accused, I believe, of sexual assault of his niece, and I think some other stuff as well. So I do think it's important to highlight whenever something like that is behind, a film in general, behind the people who made it. It's important to call attention to it. So do some research on that, and just go into this film with having it in mind that the director is not a great guy, but of course a lot more people than just the director worked on this film, and so it is important to judge it objectively in order to give it a fair shot to all the people who did put effort into it. But judging by the title, I'm sure you can infer that I was not a fan of the film. I will start off with the cast because, again, I think that is why a lot of people would see this film in the first place. And they're all good. I love all these actors, truly, just about all of them. The actors feel wasted. They feel wasted in the film. These are clearly very talented people, but director David O. Russell doesn't really know often what he's trying to do in a scene, it feels like. And so as a result, the actors are kind of doing the best they can with the material and with what they have to work with, and with what they've tried to create with these characters, and it just doesn't work a lot of the time. And I think, again, that falls on the director and the script. I also want to touch on the color palette of the film, which we'll get into maybe my largest criticism. It's very dull, and so I'm aware Emanuel Lubezki did the cinematography for the film, and by all means, he's an incredible cinematographer. He did Birdman, which, one take. He's worked with a lot of Iñárritu. He did Children of Men, which I haven't seen, but again, I know its reputation for its incredible cinematography. So the guy clearly, I got some hair sticking out up there. The guy clearly is talented, but the cinematography is very standard here. And again, that could just be the result of the director not wanting to go above and beyond with it. But the color palette of the film is very dull, like a lot of the film. And when you have a time period like the 1920s, you have potential to make it more lively. And the film in general is trying to strike a very fun tone, and yet that is not backed up by how the film looks. It looks very standard, like reading from a textbook. And I don't think that's what David O. Russell intended. And then I will get into the central part of the film, and this is really just incredibly frustrating, and in my opinion, makes Amsterdam one of the worst films of the year thus far. And it is that the film is very, very dull, but it didn't have to be. Okay? The story here, the central mystery of the film, is intriguing. Okay? When you reach the end and you realize all that stuff, you're like, okay, this is an interesting mystery. And I felt that it was so mishandled and just abused at every turn that it was a complete waste of time, to be honest with you. I really don't think I will ever see this film again, but I would not be opposed if this film were told in a completely different manner, and I'll tell you why. Because David O. Russell is, I wasn't on the set, obviously, I have no idea what's going on here, but it feels like a complete mess, and that they were either just having too much fun making it or never really cared about a final product of sorts, because it is just so jarringly messy. The one thing that really noticed me and really, really irked me was the fact that in the film is mostly conversational dialogue. That's just the majority of the film. And without fail, just about every character in every conversation manages to drone on for a ridiculous amount of time, just endlessly talking, sometimes for the purpose of comedy, sometimes for the purpose of exposition, and this means one of two things. Either the script was written that way, so that characters just had huge chunks of dialogue, again, for the purpose of comedy or exposition, or this is improvisation, and either way, the editor didn't do enough to cut down on it, and it was just a bad idea from the start. Nobody wants to sit through these scenes because there's no tension. You're not rushing towards anything. It feels like you're getting this from a textbook. The comedy, unfortunately, again, pretty much a majority of the comedy in this film relies on characters talking for longer than they should. And then they say some ridiculous stuff as a result, and you're supposed to laugh. And they hit that note repeatedly. And it gets very, very, very boring very fast. And so I think, just maybe if you want comedy in your film, switch it up a little more, give us some more variety, because clearly doing that repeatedly is not working. And there are some funny moments in the film, but that's just because the film's, it's a batting average. You're up to bat every 30 seconds. Of course, you're going to hit some, not even out of the park, but you're going to, make a couple of bases every now and then. But, so the comedy's not very funny, and then the dialogue in general, just endlessly droning on, I wanted to leave, I really did, and it goes forever. And every scene as a result is so, I'm going to use the word again, dull. And that's really my main problem with the film, because again, most of it is conversational dialogue, and so when you treat your conversational dialogue like that, and it's the majority of the film, put two and two together, the film is not good. But there are also scenes, the mystery here in general, it doesn't flow well. It doesn't flow well at all. Because you get a bit of it at the start, you do a flashback, you come back, and it's just place to place, to person, and sorry, I don't know if you can hear that, pretty loud. Place to place, person to person, and you learn bits and pieces at each location, and you meet all these more colorful characters that might be interesting given a different script, perhaps, or in the hands of a different director. But, it's not flowing well. And because these scenes just drone on and on with endless talking, there's no sense of urgency like there needs to be in a mystery. In any film, there needs to be a sense of urgency, but certainly in a mystery, for God's sake, you need to be constantly moving towards something. Scenes need tension. They need excitement. You need to be pulled in. And there are scenes in the film where characters will describe something intense happening. There's a specific scene I'm thinking of where characters describe something very intense that happened to them, and because of the way they tell it, and because of the way the flashback is it is baffling. It is thrown into the film at this time. They really could not have fit it in anywhere else. It feels like that. It feels like they didn't give much thought, so they're just like, throw it in there, nobody will care. And you throw that scene in, and you just don't care. It doesn't feel like a big deal like the film wants you to think it is, because it's just lightly tossed in there. The characters talk about it like they're reading it from a textbook with hints and pieces of comedy thrown in to their lines. But just shockingly messy. Like, this is not, and the film cost $80 million. These are not mistakes that can be let slide because it is sloppy. And then I will just say, this is not a new criticism. I'm just finally making the point. If you've seen the film, you will know what I'm talking about. But the climax of the film, you get to it, and I'm starting to think, maybe they've got something here, because the plot has been fully revealed. It's kind of also just tacked on there, by the way. There's no way you really could have arrived to that conclusion yourself, at least strongly. But it's tacked on there at the end, and then they just forget to build up the tension. But then there's this one scene where you have most of the cast of the film all in this one room, which normally would be pretty exciting. These are some high caliber actors. But the tone, first of all, is just so wildly all over the place. You'll have characters making jokes, and then somebody will turn around and give some very serious exposition about a very serious thing. Christian Bale's character, the main character, is narrating so much of this portion just because they have to give you so much information, and they have so little time to do it because the film is coming to a close. So he's just, you're lapping it up like a dog as he's feeding you. He's like throwing food on the ground. Like, really? You're gonna narratively tell us that the resolution of the mystery, that's your plan? For God's sake, it's disgraceful. And you have, for God's sake, it really is, it's like very frustrating. Something that doesn't actually happen in reality for the sake of comedy occurs, which never happens again in the film. It didn't happen prior to that, certainly. So it's, again, just very tacked on, ridiculous for comedic purposes, something they likely made up the day of shooting, for God's sake. And the film, as you can imagine, the scene drones on, and every character has to talk at length about some ridiculous nonsense. And as a result, Amsterdam is dull, not captivating whatsoever. Dull, not captivating whatsoever. How do you fix Amsterdam? That's an interesting question. One, script rewrites, for God's sake. Because if it is the script and it's not improvisation, then you have a fundamentally flawed script. Cut down on the dialogue. I would reframe a lot of how the film is edited, I guess. I would certainly not, because there's no, again, urgency. You're not rushing through the film at any particular pace. It feels location to location. So I'd cut maybe, 30 minutes off this film, not because I didn't enjoy watching the actors give their performances, but because the mystery loses so much of its impact when it's just, you're on an endless train ride to it. There's no... It's just something that's given to you. You go from place to place, and at the end, it's plopped onto you, and the whole time you feel like you've been wasting your time. And there are scenes in this film where it'll start one way, and every scene needs a purpose. And so a scene will start off with a certain purpose. And again, because I guess they felt like they didn't have enough time, or they needed an extra bit of comedy or drama or something, they'll just throw a ton more onto that scene. They'll give it even more purpose. And it doesn't add any urgency. It doesn't add any comedy. It just makes it look sloppy and like a mess. Amsterdam is not a good film. It is a very bad film, in my opinion. A very, very sloppy film, unfunny, not particularly fun, which is what I was hoping for at the very least. I'm not the biggest David O. Russell fan, but I had, a good bit of fun with American Hustle. There was none to be found in Amsterdam for me. So Amsterdam is unfortunately going to get a D. It was a very, very frustrating experience. Let me know if you liked it. Look, I guess there's maybe some redeeming stuff here. Again, the performances are alright. If you're going into the film looking for some high caliber actors giving good performances, you're going to get that. I do think they were wasted. I think there are great performances in here that just weren't tapped into. So let me know what you thought of the film, if you enjoyed it, if you thought it was funny. I suppose a lot of my criticisms are subjective. If you could get past the endless droning of the dialogue. I've been EDPC Reviews. You've just been the absolute best, folks. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.